In this video, we're going to be looking at the structures we can see on these brain models. So there's a couple different types. There's kind of this plasticky one, and then we'll also look at a different type. So starting off, here is the model. So all of this stuff up here is going to be showing the cerebrum. Okay, you have your two cerebral hemispheres. And then this brown part back here is called the cerebellum. It means like a little brain. That's a landmark you can look for to know you're looking at the posterior side when we're looking at the lobes of the cerebrum. But looking at just the other general structures as we're going along, tucked underneath, this part in here is going to be the brainstem. And we'll learn there's three different parts. Kind of way up in here is going to be the midbrain. Get my pointer here. So you have the midbrain up through there. Where this bulges out here is called the pons. And then as it continues on down, called the medulla or medulla oblongata. So the brain, has those four major structures. We have cerebrum, cerebellum, brainstem. The fourth one is called the diencephalon. If you remember, that's going to be found inside the brain because it gets tucked in here. And that's going to be found kind of at the center area. I think it kind of looks like a beak of a bird or kind of like a bird's head here. So all of this area in here is all called the diencephalon. There's three parts of the diencephalon. It's kind of right at the center. It kind of looks like the eye of the bird right there. This is going to be the thalamus. That's what's running through there. Edits and sorts out sensory information. And then underneath the thalamus, this general area here is the hypothalamus. So underneath the thalamus. And then back here, this part that's kind of above or upon that, you could say the thalamus is the epithalamus. So kind of where that red little dot is, it's through there. Something else you can look for on the other side of this model. So again, so in the center, we had the whole diencephalon. We have the thalamus, epithalamus, hypothalamus. Hypothalamus, you can look for it connecting to that pituitary gland. Okay, there's a connection between those two structures. Here's the internal view of that cerebellum. And going back to the brainstem, we said the part that's going to be found kind of right underneath thalamus and hypothalamus, this portion in here is the midbrain. So the most superior part of the brainstem. And then down here where it bulges out is called the pons. And then underneath that you have the medulla oblongata. All of these white lines that you're seeing coming off here, those are representing different cranial nerves. A lot of the cranial nerves branch off of the brainstem. Something else that we can see internally here, we see the collection, some of the white matter within the brain is all collected together, this unit here called the corpus callosum. It's kind of a body of tissue, corpus callosum. And you can look for that. It's going to be running kind of above that thalamus, ultimately. On this particular model, we don't see the distinction between gray matter and white matter. We'll see that on another model. Here's this side's view of that corpus callosum. So looking at some of the lobes that we can see, so on the cerebrum's divided into different lobes. So we said, remember that cerebellum is on the posterior side. So right above that, you can imagine like this part of the brain, this is going to be representing the occipital lobe on either side through there. Opposite to that, over here, this is representing the frontal lobe of the brain. And then right stacked in the middle, maybe kind of right around here, is the the parietal lobes on either side. And then on the side, we can see the temporal lobes. This particular model, we can't really see the insula lobe, but imagine that it's tucked underneath through there. The couple of fissures or sulcus you need to know running right down the center. Let's kind of imagine seeing like this line going down. That's representing the longitudinal fissure. And then right at the center, I'll just use one of these for now. If you can kind of try to map out like a line that's kind of running through, that's going to be the central sulcus. It's going to be dividing the frontal lobe from the parietal lobe. So that's your central sulcus. And then we said that elevated ridge on either side is called a gyrus. So this is going to be that pre-central gyrus that's on the frontal lobe. Back here, this is the post-central gyrus. You can also look at it on this particular side over here. So again, we have starting through here, we got that central sulcus coming through there. It kind of meets up right at the end of the temporal lobe. And then we have the gyrus, the pre-central gyrus that's on the frontal lobe. And then we have the post-central gyrus that's on the parietal lobe, okay? More towards the posterior side of the brain. So let's look at this other brain model we can see. So here's another model we can see, kind of showing some of the similar types of structures. So we have all of the cerebrum up here. We have the cerebellum. Again, if we look underneath, we're going to see the brain stem. You can kind of see the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. It's going to continue to become the spinal cord. And again, on the cerebrum, we have the different lobes. So opposite side of cerebellum, all through here, this is going to represent the frontal lobe of our cerebrum. If we move back, we're going to be on the parietal lobe. And then at the very, very back, next to cerebellum, we can imagine is where the occipital lobe is located. And then on the sides, we have the temporal lobe. And this is where we can start to kind of pull apart this brain model. We see even more foldings, convolutions in there, and that's representing the insula lobe. Also, when we look on the inside surface, this model is showing us the distinction. So remember, the outermost layer of the cerebrum is called the cerebral cortex. This is made up of gray matter, we say. Those fibers are not myelinated. Deep to that, the fibers that are myelinated have this white color. So this is representing all of this white matter in the brain. So this pinkish color, that's the gray matter. And then inside here is the white matter. Also something we can start to see in this particular model, when we take off these pieces, and we get kind of this weird view, we see these internal cavities that are existing in the brain. They contain the fluid, the cerebrospinal fluid. These are called ventricles. We have kind of a strange model that shows just the ventricles by themselves. Oops. So here's this guy. So within your brain, I'll kind of hold this one up. Imagine this structure here. These cavities are still existing within your brain structures. Okay, so this model is showing the different ventricles that we have. Kind of looks like a dragon of some sort. But containing really important cerebrospinal fluid. So here's kind of the same view of those two ventricles through there. Also, if we go back, if we think the structure that's going to divide the two hemispheres, that's what we call the longitudinal fissure. Try to put our brain back together here. So again, so running down here, we have longitudinal fissure. And then as we come down, so finding a sulcus that's dividing frontal lobe from parietal lobe, that's going to be representing the central sulcus. And then again, in front, we have pre-central gyrus. Behind is the post-central gyrus. So I think that's all the structures to know that we can see on these brain models.